Cool. Let's get started. Welcome to the second episode of the Eternal Adventures podcast with your guests, or with your hosts, TK and Claire. I'm really excited about this episode. Today we're going to get a little bit more in the weeds of things. We're going to be talking about creating blueprints for project releases, particularly through our first release as a company, Eternal Garden Zero, kind of as like a guiding example for this conversation. We're also going to look at things through an AI lens and also how we think about building a marketplace of IP and commercializing your portfolio of skills through a business lens. And this will all be through the lens of this multimedia project that we released. And we'll get into the weeds of how it came about, how it was curated, the creation process, the release process, and everything in between. So to get into kind of how this came about, it really came from like a signal. I would say like the initial Eternal Garden albums that you had released had so much excitement and signal around them that there was a lot of buzz around the fact that you were kind of releasing these very intentional projects. And that's something that we talked about in the first podcast. And so it was really obvious, to us when we were coming together that we had somewhat of a blueprint for how we wanted to develop projects. And so we decided, okay, we're going to expand upon this. And that's how we kind of got to this point of developing the Genesis project for when our company came together. So let's talk about the details. Let's start with like, what is Eternal Garden Zero, just for those who may be new here or getting familiar with our team in general. I think it would be a good starting point to talk about just like a high level breakdown of like what the project is from a whole structural perspective.
Yeah. So I think in the last episode and in what you just said, we kind of outlined that Eternal Garden started off as a body of music that had a narrative that was attached to it. And this narrative was able to be unlocked if you bought an NFT from the on-chain album release. And so once the project started to gain a lot of like notoriety and traction from the narrative side, more so than the music side, that's when I saw the opportunity to expand Eternal Garden into a full-fledged franchise, basically. That's when I saw the vision to expand it into a full-fledged franchise. And so I had to take a step back and say, okay, like I wrote this cool story, but what does the rest of the world look like? What do the characters look like? How do people get involved in this world? How do I bring other creators into an ecosystem where they can help me tell a story as well? And that has been something that I've kind of been trying to accomplish for over a decade now, right? Like tell a really good story, bring in other artists, namely musicians, right, to feature on these musical projects and be a part of the story that I was trying to tell, essentially. And so I think after releasing the original Eternal Garden, technically I should talk about Origins before I get to Zero, because we released, I talked about that last episode too, but, released the Eternal Garden, the first project, and then Eternal Garden Origins, which narratively ended up becoming the prequel to the story in Eternal Garden. And so having had those two projects under the belt, that's what allowed me to say, okay, I feel like I've established enough to be able to bring in other artists that can be a part of the storytelling process. And so Zero, it's all kind of like not thrown together, but we have to kind of distinguish kind of all the different titles, because originally the idea for Zero was called Garden X, right? So Garden X stands for Garden Expansion, and all that meant was we are opening up the floor for other artists to come into the Eternal Garden universe and tell their story, become a character within the Eternal Garden universe and tell their story, whether it's canon or whether it's fan fiction. You know, we're opening up Eternal Garden to becoming a multiplayer ecosystem. And so the idea is that that exists in a UGC perspective, but also in a more curated and like team driven perspective as well. And so Zero was kind of our first curated team driven Eternal Garden project in which we were bringing in other artists and basically like walking them through the process of what it looks like to become a character within the Eternal Garden universe, and then to basically embark on your own journey. So I know we haven't really talked about the story of Eternal Garden, but Eternal Garden is a sci-fi fantasy epic about a mystical seed that has the power to spawn infinite worlds. And it centers around humanity in the future having spawned into 7 different evolutionary pathways. There's actually more than 7, but we'll start with 7 for now. And there's one outlier of this evolutionary pathway that came before the rest of them. And there's a race called Arcadians. And Arcadians are essentially descendants of angels and demons. And, you know, not to give the story away, but the DNA of Arcadians was harvested in order to help humanity evolve into these brand new pathways that allow us to live in extreme environmental conditions without any trouble at all. So what I did was, or what we decided to do was, okay, I'm going to get 5 of like, you know, some really amazing, talented artists who are also close friends of mine and turn them into Arcadians and work on music with those artists, singles to start, and then eventually into, you know, full-on projects. And the single kind of is like a pilot, right, into their story within the Eternal Garden world, but then the projects become kind of their own mini series within the world as well. And so it started off with that idea in general being Garden X, and then Zero going on to being the curated version of that. And it was a really special experience to put together. I think at first it just started off with the visuals. Like we used our AI tools and our design tools to just take all of these artists and turn them into Arcadians. So if you check out the Zero drop, you'll see like Sarah Phillips, for example, as an Arcadian. You'll see Reethi Sings as an Arcadian. And they have these like majestic, you know, warrior outfits on with chainmail and armor, but then these like massive wings on them too. And it's like super eye-catching. You're just like, what is this? And that was, even in the process of creating that, that was around the first time that we figured out how to use AI to just turn people into completely different things, right? Before it became as like popular and commonplace as it is now. So when you see those images, those were like the eureka moments, like the very first seedlings of us really turning Eternal Garden into a multiplayer ecosystem. So it started off with those visuals, and then we sat everybody down and we went through a process that's called like a garden reflection. And I presented them with a series of questions. And this series of questions, it touched on their ideologies, their moral compass, their values, the way they view the world, the way they view themselves, the way they view their place in the world as well, and their hopes and dreams. And we used all of that feedback in order to draft kind of the synopsis for what their story would be within our universe, but also leaving it open-ended for them to be able to come in and help tell the story in a way that was authentic to who they are individually. So I believe Sarah was the first one that we did it with. And it's funny because she came, I set it up to where it was like we were going to come, like she came to the house for a studio session. And when she got in here, she was like, I was outside and there was a butterfly on the ground. And like I kneeled down to pick it up, and as soon as I went to pick it up, it like flew and like landed on my finger, and it stayed with me for a while. And her coming in and telling that story was there's a whole segment of her story that involves the Papillon people, right? Which is basically like it's tough because we haven't gotten into like all the deep lore of Eternal Garden, but there are a group of humans called verdants. They are the evolutionary path that has grown to adapt to flora and fauna and to be able to live in areas with high vegetation, I guess we'll call it. But within that is like a subset or a subspecies of verdants that are essentially they have evolved and taken on the likeness and I guess biology of insects. So within them are like essentially butterfly people. And her story is essentially that she was orphaned as a child and ended up being raised amongst this group of people, even though she is an Arcadian and she's not from their world whatsoever. And so just that little detail and her coming in and then being presented with the questions and basically answering those questions and then us taking that detail and combining it with the things that she had expressed, I think that gave us the information that we needed to help her draft that storyline. And then from there we went into working on the music, right? So the song that came out on Zero with Sarah was a song called Imagine. And that's not a song that we made here. It's actually a song that we had worked on previously at Spotify Studio for their Notable program. And yeah, it was amazing. We worked on the song together, and then that day she came in. We worked on some new music. We worked on finalizing that song as well. And then I want to say over the course of like the rest of that year, I ended up like locking in and kind of creating her whole project using her AI voice model, which is a whole different conversation. But that's kind of the process, right, of taking an artist who's completely unfamiliar with, well, I won't say completely unfamiliar, but is not integrated into the Eternal Garden world yet, and walking them through the process of self-reflection, synopsis and narrative development, character development, and then actual creation of the art. So creation of the imagery and creation of the music as well. And so we replicated that process with all the other artists. So we replicated that process with Cayenne Cruz. We did it with Reefy Sings. We did it with Domino, obviously myself, Sarah Phillips, and then Kevin George. We went through this process with everybody. And then once the music was done, then the fun part was going into creating the music video visuals, right? Like the actual performance visuals of it. So I was able to work with a really dope director named Ave, and he had this, basically I'll call it like an AI music video studio, right? Where you walk in, he's in a whole different state, and there's a green screen there, and he's set up the room to work completely via robotics, right? So you go in there, he says, what do you want to do, right? He's got remote control over his computer. He's like, okay, let's shoot a few different angles on the green screen. You pick the background that you want from Unreal Engine. So that was easy for us to be able to pick backgrounds that matched the different environments that each character, each Arcadian kind of grew up in, or whatever situation they were currently dealing with at that time. So allowed us to be extremely cohesive with the design of the character, the storyline, but then also the real world performance of this music, if that makes sense. So, and that goes into a whole nother concept, which is not just like that this artist becomes a character in the world, but there's an IRL component where they're kind of reflecting or mirroring what their character is going through in the story, reflecting that in real life.
Yeah.
And then that leads into like the deeper concept, which is kind of the same concept of Darkside, which is I'm TK as an individual, right? And I'm going on this metaphysical journey in which I am uncovering the secrets of my past as an Arcadian. And my past as an Arcadian is told through the story of Eternal Garden and is continued to be expressed through the various mediums that we share it through. So through the music, through the visuals, the music videos, the narrative, so on and so forth. So I don't know, that might sound like a handful or a lot to comprehend right now, but it's basically just, being able to connect real world people with real fan bases, real careers, real artistry, to a fictional world, and to be able to seamlessly go back and forth between those spaces. So yeah, that was like how I think Zero was conceptualized, and the idea of Garden X or Garden Expansion still existed, or still exists, I should say, as more of a UGC component, as more of an opportunity for people who are not working with us directly to curate these projects to be able to come in and tell their own Eternal Garden stories, create their own characters, and share their art or their talent in a way that contributes to the overall ecosystem.
I love that. I love that like starting point of the story, because I think it like really touches on something that's really important for us, which is how can we create value for the artists that we're working with in a ways that we're creating value for ourselves. So a lot of these blueprints you had initially created through projects that you had released, right? Origins and Eternal Garden, and those were in their own right like solo projects. And so this was like such a prime example of, okay, well, we're not just kind of co-creating music, but we're also integrating them into all these different forms of media that coexist and have an opportunity to also produce serious value for them in the future. And that's something that we can talk about, like our larger like philosophy behind how we want the IP to expand and what our intentions are for growing a franchise. But like the more you participate in the early days as an artist, the more value you can potentially capture and bring in for yourself at a later point through that participation, not just like musically speaking, which I think is like such an interesting and not novel topic. There's different ways that exists today, but like the way that I think we're doing it, especially with the tech component, I think is what makes it so unique.
I agree, for sure. I can't say that I've seen a project actually operate in this way. I mean, you see different components and remnants of it, right? Like all of this, the multiplayer ecosystem component is based in fan fiction, right? Mm-hmm. And then we've always had so many narrative albums, right? Like Michael Jackson Thriller, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy by Kanye West. We have Lemonade by Beyonce. We have Whack World by Tierra Whack, right? Intergalactic by Kid Cudi. We have, to a degree, Astro World by Travis Scott. And that's just the tip of the iceberg in terms of, 2088 by, Big Sean and Jhené Aiko. Like there's so many different projects that took a body of music and turned it into a full-on narrative and a full-on world that was able to bring people in. Mm-hmm. I mean, even something as simple as Good Kid, Mad City, right? Mm-hmm. You felt like you were in Compton with K-Dot and his homies, right? But like there's that, but then there's also creating like a multimedia experience, right? Yeah. Like Astro World was one thing that was cool because it was, we're going to turn this into actual like a physical festival, right? And then we're going to go on Fortnite and people will be able to watch a Travis Scott concert like while they play and things of that nature. I think what we are doing is, instead of that narrative being created, living and existing for a moment and then dying, or maybe not dying, but just like Finn, right? There's a period there. We are actually turning Eternal Garden into a standalone franchise. So it's a standalone sci-fi fantasy franchise that began as a musical project, but it has legs and wings of its own and can continue to grow even when we decide to develop other ideas or other projects. Yeah. And so that's one component, right? Is that it's its own living, breathing thing. but then also we empower other artists to come in and create underneath that umbrella and to expand the world in whatever direction that they see fit, as long as it's within the rules of the world, within the scope of the foundation that we have laid of for this story. Otherwise, it's kind of like open season, right? You can come in and be whoever you want to be, and you can have your impact on the story. But it's different than just like a an open world player versus everyone type thing. It's there are actual content pieces that come out from different artists or creatives being involved in developing the story. So you can be someone who is just simply a writer, right? And you're simply writing Eternal Garden content, but you can be someone who's like, I'm putting out an album or a body of work, and it is the soundtrack to my character's story. Yeah. Or you can be a visual artist and you're saying, I'm doing an art gallery, and this art gallery is sharing and expressing, or it's telling my story visually, right? Or you can be someone who's doing all of that combined in a way, right? And that's kind of what I've been doing with Darkside, and it's what we did with Zero, and it's what we will continue to do with future projects. But yeah, it's definitely something very unique for sure.
Yeah. Let's talk about like let's go back into the music creation process. Because I thought, you were obviously on the front lines of curating the artists and bringing in the people that you thought were right for participating in a project like this, who would be willing to kind of go down this very unique path with you and with us as a team, and trust you as like a creative leader in producing everything. But let's talk about like the actual process of creating the music and the way that like you think about the music wrapping around the story, and the story kind of being like a creative guardrail for you. Because you've done at this point, if you include Darkside, there's really 4 Eternal Garden projects that are out, which is crazy to think about. 4 big projects, complete projects, not just singles like albums, that have been clearly thought through, years of work and years of music creation. And this, we were intentionally creating, you were intentionally creating this music for Zero. It was happening in real time while we were working on the rest of the project as a whole. So there was kind of a time constraint and a very serious guardrail. So like, how did you think about making sure, if at all, the music was wrapping around the story in some way, whether it was like the lyrics, the story, the sonics?
Yeah, I would actually say I disagree, and I did my best not to view the story as a guardrail. Yeah. Because in order for you to be able, the thing about everything that we do is that all of it could stand alone, right? Yeah. Like, the music is good enough to stand alone without you knowing anything about Eternal Garden as a narrative. Right. There are still so many people that are listening to Darkside. I would say a majority of people right now consuming Darkside in a traditional manner, they're not privy to the big picture of what Eternal Garden is. Mm-hmm. Like, they're privy to the narrative of what Darkside is, but not how it connects to this greater world and to other artists and things of that nature, because we're still taking them along, that journey. Yeah. But the same could be said for the visuals of Zero. The same could be said for really any component of the multimedia world that is Eternal Garden as a whole. Mm-hmm. The way that you do that, right, is like, what story you're trying to tell or what world you're trying to, work within, but you allow that art form to grow in the way that it naturally would. So if I'm writing a song and I'm like, oh, well, it has to, like, I can't talk about this because of what the story is, then I'm doing a disservice to the song. It's almost better to let the music evolve the way that it would naturally and change the story than to do it the other way around. And that's kind of, and I'm not saying that like that never happens, because sometimes there are
Right.
things that you just love so much in the story that you're like, okay, I don't want to change. But it's more so, I think at that point it becomes more so about avoiding certain topics than, completely like changing something that, changing a dope line or an inspiration that comes to you. Because
Yeah.
when you're writing music, I mean, emotions in general are, you could be writing, it could be a story about Sarah being in love with a character, right?
Yeah.
If I come up with a lyric that is, you know, the antithesis to that, that doesn't mean that that can't be a fleeting emotion that she felt in the middle of being in love, you know?
Absolutely.
But if
Yeah.
someone's in the room like, well, you can't say that because she's in love
Right.
with the guy, right?
Yeah.
Then the song is suffering and we lose dynamic in the creation process.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it's like 50-50. Like, yes, there is an overall world, right, that you want to stay within, but at the
Yeah.
same time, I don't think it's as tight as a guardrail. And I'm just nitpicking the word that you used, by the way.
Yeah.
But like, it's not as like tight as that, because
Yeah.
you still want the art to be expressed in the fullness of itself.
Yeah.
So every single process is different. Like, some songs from Zero were things that were worked on prior, like there were remnants of that prior to the concept even existing,
Yeah.
right? And we kind of let those songs continue to evolve in the way that they were naturally, and then seeing how it interacted with the story, if the story needed to be changed or not. And most of the time, you don't really need to change the story because everything is a timeline, right?
Yeah.
So it's like sometimes it's not that the story needs to change. You just need to figure out where in the story that this work of art fits.
Yeah.
And if you can do that, then you just keep creating until you've done something that fills all the different milestones within the timeline. So that's for like songs that kind of previously existed. And then, yeah, to sum it up, there are times where you can be very, very specific, right? Like we're writing a new song and it really is specifically about this moment that is happening in time, right? But you still just want to be careful, because that's how you like end up doing like a corny musical, right? Where you're just
Yeah.
like, you're too on the nose. You're like,
Yeah.
it's too specific.
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
saying like characters' names
Yeah.
in the music,
Like
and
it's like you have to consume the story in order to consume the music.
exactly
You
in
can't
order
have
for the
one
music to
without the
make
other.
sense. And that
Yeah.
we can't risk that, because
Yeah.
for us,
For sure.
everything, like in order for it to be dope and to be
Yeah.
cool, like everything has to be able to
Stand
live
alone.
on its own,
Yeah.
without any other context. And maybe, I mean, sometimes that can be a shot in the foot too, right? Like,
Right.
because sometimes being very specific is what gives people the signal that there is more, right? Like,
Yeah.
okay, this is very specific. I must be missing something. And that can trigger a curiosity for people to go like search. But
Yeah.
I think we're still trying to just find the balance of, this could be a top 40 record without you ever knowing about Eternal Garden.
Yeah.
Right. And if you do the deep dive, then that's how you find the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Right. Or this can be an art piece that's sold in a gallery without you knowing what Eternal Garden is. You just think it looks great. Right. And if you do the deep dive, you find the rest of it. I think that's where we try to lean towards.
Yeah.
And, we're learning every day how valuable that is to the creative process.
Yeah. I love that answer. I love that perspective, because I think about Origins as an example of maybe a more tightly wound project, at least in the way that I had, received the release. It was, you had this like trailer that you had made, and the visuals and the music all seemed to be tied to the story. And it didn't feel like it was required to know everything that was happening, but it felt maybe a little bit closer, especially the way that the sound of the music. But I think what's been cool is, like you said, it's a double-edged sword. With releasing Zero, I think, a lot of the feedback we've gotten was like, this project is crazy. And we've had people that are just reading or viewing the codex, which we can break down in a second. We've had people that are just experiencing the music. And through that, we've like received all these signals that like basically everything is exciting. And so now, as an independent team that's growing, how do we like bring the music and the story closer together. But I also think there's the perspective that we always carry of like, you as an artist yourself, you have to exist and stand alone outside of all of this, because you are separate. You are separate from Eternal Garden. And as much as we want to bring you closer to the story, it's also really important to like stay true to the heart of everything that we're building, which is really the music, which is the heart of the company.
Yeah, that's a great point, because and that it applies to everyone.
Yes.
Right? Like, it literally applies to anyone that chooses to be a part of this world and
Yes.
contribute. I mean, I'm sure there is a world where like there is someone who never thought that they wanted to create, right? Never thought they wanted to write a story or to be an artist or like a visual artist or to make music.
Yeah.
But they are like, they were inspired by what our world brings to them, and they're like,
Yeah.
I'm an Eternal Garden artist. Like, I specifically make art for this world. And I
Yeah.
think if we get there one day at scale, that would be incredible, right? Because that just shows
Yeah.
how big we are.
Right.
But to all of my last points, when we do work with an artist, right, the art that we create has to be able to also live amongst the rest of the art that they create individually.
Right.
So if we make a song with Kaya and Cruz, it has to be a song that can be on their Spotify page and won't, like, it can stand out because the music is going to be incredible, but it can't be like, oh, this song sounds like it's completely, like it's not cohesive with the rest of their sound, or
Yeah.
it doesn't make sense, or it almost sounds like it's from a specific soundtrack and not
Yeah.
a part of this artist's catalog, if that makes
Yeah.
sense, right? And same thing with me. It's like, yeah, Eternal Garden is my baby, and this is something that I want to see develop and grow bigger than me, but I also have to continually fight to not lose myself in the process and not,
Yeah.
put
For
my
sure.
personal artistry on the back burner, because at the end of the day, that's the source of my greatness, right? Like, that's the
Yeah.
source of my truth, and that's how we got here in the first place. So
Exactly.
and that's what's going to continue to like birth more ideas, more worlds, more universes, right? And that's how we
Yeah.
build an empire. And so it's important for me to continue going back to that well and, bathing myself in the water, as opposed to being like, look, I started a river over here. And
Right.
It's growing. It'll be an
Right.
ocean one day. It's
Right.
like, great, cool. But like,
And then we lose you.
don't forget where you got the water from. Yeah.
Right. For sure.
So,
Well said.
so yeah, I think that is consistent. That is my truth for sure. I think
Yeah.
that will be consistent for people that we work with.
Yeah.
Obviously, they don't have the same amount of investment, right, as we do. But that's
Yeah.
right now. There will be people that will be extremely invested
For sure.
in this ecosystem, and I think
For sure.
they maybe will struggle with the same things.
Yeah.
And then there will be the people that don't struggle at all, because they're like, I love this. This is what I want to be a part of. This is what I want to build. And I think fan fiction as a whole will be something monetizable in the future. And it'll be something that, it'll be monetizable because of the way that licenses will work, because of the way that IP can be stored and tracked on chain, which is a whole nother conversation. But when that reality starts to set in, I think
Yeah.
that's when people can say, hey, I'm going to specifically work on this project, and this is my full-time job, right? And this is
Yeah.
what's paying my bills, but it's also my passion, and I feel fulfilled continuing to create underneath this umbrella.
Yeah, for sure. It's early days. We're laying the foundation with all these early projects, and more importantly, like creating that source material that people can pull from to then grow and nurture their own gardens within the garden. So I think that I think the scale at which we're doing things and the way that we've approached these first projects is really great. And like you said, we're learning so much throughout the process about how to bring the story closer together so that there is some sort of through line and enough Easter eggs to where you can kind of understand that there's this bigger thing that's kind of brewing underneath. And I think that some of the artists that you had mentioned are like really great examples of individuals who built something massive that will live past them. I think Kid Cudi is a great example. I always go back to that with Intergalactic, which he has more coming that's developing further. I think that's a great example of like a standalone project that, you know, is easily identifiable with the artist, but the music, again, just stands on its own. And that's like what makes it so special. Let's talk about, let's like transition. Let's talk about the codex. This is like one of my favorite things to talk about, especially like how the codex was born. Because I'm sure you remember in the early days when we were plotting this, the original idea for the codex was, you know, you had talked about creating like a physical lookbook, which we wanted to kind of integrate into our releases, like physical components, apparel. In this case, it was going to be the, you know, a beautiful landscape lookbook with a bunch of like AI imagery. And I think maybe we were like, I want to say we were a good way into starting to generate and maybe organize imagery until there was this day where it was like, no, actually, this needs to be a storybook.
Yeah, I could talk on that for sure. So I guess the thing that I forgot to mention as a part of the Zero release is that it was a multimedia project. So if you bought Zero, you were getting the album, you were getting the music videos, actually the music videos was a separate drop, but you were getting the album, you were getting the codex, digital or physical, and you were also getting a shoe that we developed, a sneaker that was like a sneaker that could have been worn like in the world or whatever, but it was based on one of the characters from the story. And we should like find a way to show the shoe on here, or like show the whole drop on here actually at some point. But the codex specifically, yeah, I mean, we at that point, you know, I had been super deep in image prompting and everything. Like it's what I was using for all of the drops. And then I got to a point where you know, once the Garden X idea was established, okay, now we're turning people into Arcadians. And then, you know, in that process, you had come along and you were, you know, getting your feet into prompting and stuff, and you started going crazy with everything. And it was like, oh, dang, okay, dope. Like we can really dive in and create, you know, much more at scale. But yeah, I had, you said this last time, but I have essentially what is the real Bible, like the real Eternal Garden Bible, right? Like it's a document with the whole world built out, all the races, all the characters, the mechanics, the way the world works, transportation, powers, you know, everything, right? And it, at first we were just like you said, trying to turn some of these AI images into a lookbook. And so we just started creating kind of some of the different races, and we were like putting them in there. And then I think one day I just started typing like on one of them, and I was like, wait, I've been thinking of a way that I can take this full world build out, right, and make it a lot more digestible so that people could understand the scope of the world without having to dive through hundreds of pages of content. And so I think once that happened, I decided, I remember saying to you like, oh, this needs to be like hybrid. Like this needs to be a mix of a lookbook and an encyclopedia, which really just turned into adding text, right? Like we did full page spreads. Yeah. And we just added text. Like maybe you could do it in post, and we can add like, you know, examples. But yeah, it'd be like the character on one side, and then it would be a short, like 1 or 2 sentence description of the character or the race or the technology or whatever. And the codex essentially became, you know, a 100-page encyclopedia of Eternal Garden. So really, if you want to understand what the Eternal Garden world looks like, you know, the past, present, and the potential future, if you know, check out the codex, you'll get a very good glimpse into what the world is.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was like, you know, fast forward to some of the image generation work and like experiments that I'm running today. I've really truly come to realize like how much of a feat that was because of how challenging it is to get realism in AI generations. Like it is so difficult because obviously when you're looking at an animated piece or really like any other art style, it's clearly not real. So it's when you're looking at AI, you're like naturally looking at it. Typically, you're looking at it to determine if it's real or not. At least at this stage of human evolution, we're in that in that discovery stage. And I think it was when I look back on it, like it's such an incredible feat to get such consistency and refinement with all of the images to put it into this like book and make it feel so real that when I was, like sometimes like when people are looking at images of the artist, they're just like they're blown away by so many factors. The fact that they're like plugged in, face, body, hair, everything, that they look like these like crazy angelic characters, and the fact that they look like they're in a studio space and we just like took pictures of them and did some editing and post and all that. Mm-hmm. I think that like that was such a good evolutionary step for us because it was also the process of refining like the language and like the prompting skills that we needed to be able to like create all of that more consistently, because we were just like up till 4 a.m. generating image after image after image, upscaling, editing, all of that to get it to that final place.
Yeah, it was a grind for sure.
Yeah.
It was a grind. I mean, because you were still in New York at the time, so we were on a time difference. So it would get to the point where it's like 1 a.m. for me, and we're still prompting and creating, and it'd be 4 a.m. for you, and like around that time you'd be like, all right, I'm starting to get a little bit sleepy.
Yeah.
And I'd feel so bad, but sometimes it was like 7 a.m. For you, right? Because it would be times where you would be like, okay, I got to check out.
Yeah.
And I would stay up to 4 a.m. and then I'd go to sleep.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes you would just thug it the whole way through until my 4 a.m.
Yeah.
And then we're both going to sleep, but it's like 7 a.m. for you. Like that's how deep in it we were.
Yeah.
We did the whole thing basically on Canva, right? Which why no one can ever talk crazy to me about Canva. But yeah, I mean, we prompted, we picked the best images, right? We came up with the text. We took the most pertinent text to add to it. And the process is not just, it was not just putting in a prompt and, upscaling and putting it on the page. It's like, we're putting in the prompt close up to get detail. We're doing zoom outs, right?
Yeah.
Then we're panning in order to expand the environment, right? And then if you, for example, if you get an image that's 3,000 by 6,000, maybe that's too big. If you get an image that's like 1,000 by 3,000, right? That image, if you try to throw it in an upscaler, right, it's not going to upscale the image. It's not going to upscale in detail, right? It'll upscale the whole thing.
Yeah.
But when you put it on a page, because the books that we had were like 11 by 13 inches or something like that. If you put it on a, that might be completely wrong, but
it sounds right. It sounds right.
Like that, right? Massive book, and I could grab it in a second. But if you put it on a page like that, right? Yeah, like dimensionally, it might be big enough. But when you're actually looking at the intricate details, you're not going to see high quality. So we're cutting these images into like 4 sections, right?
Yeah.
And like upscaling each quadrant individually,
right?
And then placing them back together. You mentioned the fact that we had the same Arcadian photos, or sorry, the same artists that we had as Arcadians. We took those same images and we put them in the book, and we gave like a brief sentence about their individual stories as well. And that's a whole different process, right? Because it's like creating the imagery, being able to put them on the character, right? They're like biometrics and stuff.
Yeah.
for all of it, we're using a lot of Photoshop, right? In order to preserve the highest amount of quality. So it wasn't just like, oh yeah, it's like I don't even know if I want to use the term like AI generated anymore, really, right? Because it's more like assisted. It's more like the foundation is the prompt for sure.
Yeah.
But if we were just putting out the images that we had prompted and upscaled, it'd be a completely different experience.
Yeah.
Right. And like all the work we did additionally to that. So
Yeah.
Definitely a special experience, like putting that together. And now, you know, obviously that was before we had, it's crazy how fast the space moves, right? Like that was before we had 90% of the tools that we have available to us now.
Literally. Literally. I was thinking about like how quickly we would have completed the project if we had like started today, maybe in half the time. But I think you made a really, really good point, because it's like very topical, because there's so much happening every second of every day in the AI world. Is the idea of AI as a collaborative partner. I think that's like a topic that some people talk about. I think it can feel, at least in my experience, sometimes it's a little, I'm always unsure when I am talking to people in, you know, the entertainment, in music, in the art world, about the fact that I have, you know, there's AI as a big part of our world in creating. And it's only when I get into the details do I start to like really lean on that philosophy of like art, the AI in no capacity or way was really replacing anybody in this process, any individual in this process, but instead was providing like this bounce back of material and ideas throughout the process. And that was from like a visual perspective, a written perspective, an animated perspective. Like when you're giving the AI the prompt for an image, you of course in your mind have something, there's something brewing in your mind of like what you want that end result to look like, but ultimately you don't know exactly what the AI is going to produce. So you have to, there's a level of uncertainty. And for me, it's like, there's excitement in there too, of not knowing what it's going to give you. But once you get refined enough, then the output that you get is at least going to have the 6 or 7 characteristics that you're asking for. And the rest is, you know, up to the computer. And I think that's the collaborative nature of the experience, is it's really human to machine right now. And that's like from a visual perspective, of course, we did, you know, we have writers who have led the charge on like writing all of our literature, and you've done a lot of the writing. I've done some writing as well. But we've definitely had, writing assistance too, with like generating ideas or organizing ideas or expanding ideas. But it's never, let's go into ChatGPT with like nothing on our minds and just see what it comes up with. There's always foundation and like source material to build on. And I think these are like great examples of how we use AI as a partner, how others could use AI as a partner. And it's like, it's not at this stage in the game, at least, and we can go into that rabbit hole. At this stage in the game, it's not as like scary as it seems. It's just a question of like, how can you make your life easier in creating, instead of like, how can I replace myself entirely or replace somebody else entirely?
Yeah, I view AI as a manifestation tool.
Yeah.
Right? Like it takes
For sure.
pre-existing thoughts and concepts. It helps you turn those intangible ideas into tangible, you know, it makes them tangible. Turns your intangible ideas into like tangible files, basically, or tangible data. And yeah, it fills a lot of gaps for you in your creative process. And some of those gaps are much bigger than others.
Yeah.
But ultimately, the beginning of getting to a final result after a prompt, it starts way before you open up ChatGPT or you open up Midjourney, especially for us, right? Like all of this was being drafted before AI was even a tool that was available.
Yeah.
Right. So like all of that work of being very specific as to what the characters look like and where they live and the type of life that they live, and all of the above. That's all information that you can feed to the AI, right? And then
Yeah.
then it's able, the more specific that you are, the more specific the result is that you get. So then you also learn, well, I have hundreds of pages of information. I need to be able to extract the most important parts of this in order to communicate to the AI in the best way that it will understand in order to give me the desired result. So, I mean, I'm not speaking rocket science here. It's just like everything that you said. You eventually learn to use it the same way how you learn how to shoot videos or make music or use Photoshop. You learn how to speak to the program in order to get the desired result. And at the end of the day, the desired result might be amazing, but rarely is it ever exactly what it is that you were trying to get. So you
Right.
have to decide, okay, how much do I continue to push the AI to keep refining until I get what I want?
Yeah.
And at what point do I say, okay, you've got me far enough, now I'll take it into my own hands and do
Yeah.
my own, hands-on individual editing in order to get the final desired result. And that
Yeah.
that has been true for literally everything that we have created and put out, whether
Yeah.
it's like, hey, help me flesh out this story or help me create this image or whatever. We are just with how do I say this? With the advent of AI, we are watching creators go from solely creating to creating and curating, right? When AI becomes a creative partner, you have the ability to create, then the ability to give your creation to the AI, ask the AI to expand on that creation, and then you curate and take out the bits and pieces that you love the most in order to add to your original creation to create like the final product. And all it really is doing is helping us get from point A to point B faster without redoing work that people before us have already done, right?
Yeah.
So it's funny when I mean, obviously there's so much danger associated with AI, and I don't want to make this a whole AI conversation right now, but there's so much danger associated with it, and rightfully so. But I
Yeah.
also just look at it as a natural progression of the transfer of information. So
Yeah.
when fire was discovered, right? Like when humanity was separated from one another, everyone kind of had to. I mean, think about how many times fire was discovered, right? It wasn't like one time
Right.
a guy like figured out he could use fire and then he told everyone. Like, I'm sure he told a lot of people, but there were
Yeah.
probably people in a whole different part of the world. And I'm no historian, by the way, so don't quote me, but there were probably people on the other side of the world who also discovered the use of fire. You know what I mean? Maybe at the same time, maybe a few years later, whatever the case may be, right? And then we go to cave paintings, and we can still go and reference cave paintings today to tell us things that took place tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of years ago when humanity first started.
Yeah.
And then we get into, languages and writing and literature, and then ultimately libraries. Like, yeah, people were like, oh, you don't go to the library every day. Libraries used to be, ChatGPT used to be the library, right? Like
Yeah.
you would go to the
Right.
library, you'd go to the library and you say, hey, I want to learn about this. And she'd say, aisle A5, right? And you go to aisle A5, you find a book that you're looking for, and you look for the page and you find the information.
Yeah.
All AI is doing is collecting all of that information, putting it in one place, which I skipped the whole internet era, right? Like, because then there's the internet, right? And now users are able to upload all this information to a collective source like data pool or information pool. Then we
Yeah.
have Google being able to Google search, having Wikipedia where you can basically, users are working together to put information together. And now with ChatGPT and Claude and these other programs, it's basically just taking all of the information that humanity has, compiled over the course of hundreds of thousands of years and put it at your fingertips.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily see an issue, right, with being able to ask, why is the sky blue, and getting an immediate answer, because the people that went out and did the research in order to figure out why the sky is blue wanted the information to be at our
Shared.
fingertips at one point in the future. What does that allow us to do? It allows us to stop redoing work that's already been done, and it opens up mental capacity for us to be more creative, more efficient, and have more time to explore, right?
Yeah.
So obviously there are precautions that we want to take, and there's a high risk for the world slipping into an era where reality is always in question, and I think we are dangerously close to that as well.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily feel like the people who are at the forefront of AI are the best people to be at the forefront of AI. I think we need a lot of people who are operating purely from an ethical perspective, utilizing AI, like pro AI people, right? But how do we use AI ethically in a way that doesn't doom humanity forever?
Yeah.
I think it's important for those types of people to be at the forefront of this technology, which is why I have always, embraced the technology, because I know my intention and I know the way that my moral compass points, right? Same thing for you and same thing for a lot of other people.
Yeah.
But I digress. I think that thought process and ideology for me is what allows me to use AI comfortably.
Yeah.
And I can sleep at night, knowing that everything that I'm giving it is original idea and original content.
Yeah.
Right. And maybe it's stuff that I've learned over the course of time, but if you think about it from that perspective, it's like nothing is original, right? Like everything is
absolutely
a progression from something that somebody else innovated in the past. And so from that perspective, I don't feel like I'm cheating the game. I know how much work and time I've put into creating all of these things manually.
Yeah.
And now I'm in a space where I don't necessarily have to keep redoing that work.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. I also think that's why this conversation is really important. Again, not to digress into that being the topic, but I think it's really important for people to have, we could talk about ethical AI all day long, but I think it's really important for people to have like tangible examples too, because I think a lot of this boils down to like an awareness problem. I think that as with any industry, the deeper involved you are, the more knowledge you have naturally. And it's sometimes hard to forget that the people that are on the outside, whether intentionally or not, may not have that same level of knowledge and awareness as you do. And that's just because of your proximity to it. Maybe you're a builder or you're a journalist, you're next to it. So you're living it, you're breathing it, you understand its impact. And I think that I personally feel a pretty strong responsibility anytime that I interact with somebody who's curious about it or standoffish towards it. Not from like a righteous perspective, but from I just want to share with you what I know, how I'm using it and why I think it's important. And if you're open to it, what I think you should educate yourself on so that you can welcome it too. And maybe you use it in a way that has positive impact for others. And I think art is such, it's, what's the word? It's a taboo topic in every industry, and including the art world in some way. I think it's being welcomed more. We're seeing it every single day. A year ago, Sony and Warner had slapped Suno with a lawsuit, and now it looks like they're in conversations to license the catalogs that they own. Same thing, a conversation is now happening between the Japanese government and OpenAI about anime. We'll see where that goes. Very hopeful for the future of that. But these conversations are happening and these changes are happening, and I think it's really important for people to decide how they want to get on board and how they want to shape it and participate, if at all. So I think it's great. I'm also wary and very, conscious of what the future could look like. So I'm I'm in the same boat as you. And I think even like a simple insight that I pulled too, just from using it as a creation partner for like visuals, I noticed that it was also giving me inspiration for new ideas without me even kind of realizing that would be like an effect of participating with it, because like human to human interact, there's inspiration that like stems from like within, like you're solo, you're laying in bed and you have an idea that comes to you. Then there's also ideas that spring from like human to human interaction. And so let's say, especially in the days when I was living in New York, I wasn't with you or, talking to some old team members, and I was alone, like generating imagery, or even now today, a picture comes up. I did not anticipate it to look any way, shape, or form that it does. And then all of a sudden, there's like a spark of an idea that comes from an image, maybe because it's like the outfit that the character is wearing or like the shape of the trees. And then all of a sudden we have this new train of thought for this like line of technology that we want to design, or maybe it's like apparel ideas, or maybe it's a really cerebral idea about like the way that the character dies. It could be anything, fill in the blank. It's like more output and more material that ends up like maybe just serving as inspiration, even if you don't end up like using it. Mm-hmm. It's still something tangible that I think it can end up being really valuable if you're able to participate with it in that way.
I agree 100%. I mean, ultimately, like, it comes down to public perception too. Going to like the first half of what you were saying.
Yeah.
Everyone that disagrees with AI, if they were sat down with the right person, you can show every single person on earth how AI can benefit them, regardless of what it is that they do.
Yeah.
And a lot of them probably know that already.
Yeah.
But they still feel strongly enough about the reasons why they don't support it. And it's tough because I think things go wrong when powerful technology becomes a consumer product before the full scope of its possibilities are explored or shared, right?
Sure.
So if there are people who are just now becoming familiar with AI and the first thing they are seeing is AI slop on a mobile app, right? They're going to be like, why are we doing this again?
Yeah.
What is this?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But if your first exposure to AI is learning that certain medical conditions, right, or certain research has, like a medical condition has been cured, right, or research has been made more efficient because of the use of AI, then you might have a different perspective of it. You might have more of a rounded perspective of it because the AI slop is still going to be there.
Yeah.
Right? And you're still going to see it, whether you want to see it or not.
Yeah.
And it's getting worse. Like, it's just getting worse. Like, the stuff I'm seeing now, I'm just like, how are we here?
It's getting weird, yeah.
So I think it's just, it's an education thing.
Yeah.
And ultimately, it'll be a decision that we just make as humans. Like, this is weird. You know what I mean? Like, we don't need to do this. And maybe, hopefully, like, that type of stuff becomes more niche, like more of a like if you want that, there's a space for you to go look for that,
right?
But it's not like a public mainstream thing that you're seeing every time you scroll on Twitter, if that makes sense. So I think to the second part of what you were saying, it really is like a creative partner that continues to be your partner over time, right?
They never leave.
It continues to grow with you, and it continues to, like you said, give you inspiration, right? Like, you, at the end of the day, you're the one putting in the prompt, but you never know, right? It's like rolling the dice sometimes, and then you get something, and you're like, wow, that is expanding a whole new, it's expanding an idea that I didn't know I had. Right. And then you go from there, and then you continue, and it just becomes like this tree of creativity until you decide to stop one day and you're like, okay, this is what I want to present to the world. So I agree. For sure.
Yeah. The Codex was like such a fun project for me. I mean, I talk about this all the time. It was so fun creating it. It was so much fun to like have the music be completed, have the book be completed, and see it all like woven together so organically, and so strong. Again, going back to the earlier points, as like these like standalone projects. And I think what's cool about the Codex too is kind of like it's another blueprint in itself. Maybe blueprint isn't quite the word, but like a library that we can always pull from when we go to create other projects in the future and expand the story. And that's what I also really like about it is when somebody asks, it's an encyclopedia to the story of Eternal Garden, but for you and I think it's it's source material for expansion. It was the inspiration for how we came up with our first novel that we're about to release. It'll likely be inspiration for the development of future novels. It's also, because it has the prologue and the epilogue woven into everything, it's also gonna feed everything.
Yeah.
I haven't asked you this, but like, do you think it'll feed future music projects? I mean, I know yes in some capacity, but we also have so many projects that we're waiting to put out because we just have so much music. So
Yeah, it definitely will for sure. I mean, at the end of the day, it's still a limited expression of the full story.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah, I mean, there are all of the Arcadian projects, right, that we still want to explore in some capacity.
Yeah.
For example, the book is also an AR experience, so you can scan every page with your phone, and the imagery will animate and play like a video. And for some of those, we created music, right? Like for example, like the gardener, like we created music for his page or for his trailer, I should say. And it's like, I still want to figure out what to do with that song, right?
Yeah.
So
That song is crazy.
for sure, I think everything will always inspire something else.
Yeah.
And it might not be something that we know now, but we might go back and look at it and be like, we should expand on this. Because we even had to decide what we were going to put in the codex to begin with. Like if there was a time where we did the characters, and I was like, okay, I'm going to do the characters, and then I'm going to do the planets. And I was trying to do all the planets individually, but I was having a hard time creating. That's back when environments weren't the easy, like you didn't get the best results from prompting environments.
Yeah.
So at that time, I kind of was like, let's not do that, because it's been holding us up. We've been struggling to generate, what wisdom looks like for 2 weeks, and it's holding us back. So let's just scrap the whole planets thing. We'll just put them all in one page, and you know what I mean?
Yes.
So, yeah, it's just kind of, you're always constantly deciding what you're going to expand and what you're not going to expand. But I think the Codex is in such a good place as an art piece that I think it'll continue to be a source of inspiration in the future.
Yeah, for sure. And I think like, we can wrap this up, but I think like a good summary of this project is it's like such a culmination of everything that we do as a studio. And I love that. It's such a culmination. Like we put everything into that project. It was music. It was a bit of, a dash of artist development, if you will, artist collaboration, AI, tech. There was even like a Web3 element where we did a digital distribution of the Codex too, which was awesome. And I think that's something that I also like cherish. And I think it's really cool that it was a manifestation of all of our philosophies in one very concise project, as concise as it could possibly be.
Yeah, I agree. And it's interesting because like the primary form factor is literature, but you pull out that phone and you scan it, it takes you on that whole multimedia journey.
Yeah.
Even when you go on the pages of the artists, right, you scan it and it plays the song that they recorded for the Zero project.
Yeah.
So, it's tougher sometimes because you're like, you want to be able to showcase that in like the fullness of its ability, but literature is not, I won't say it's not as popular. It's probably more popular than it was in the past. But my point is that there's so much more. There are more mediums for people to consume art right? Through. So sometimes they're used to just scrolling on social media as opposed to like buying a book and like scanning it for this experience. So we're figuring out those things along the way too, and how to continue sharing it in a way that has reach. But for now, I think even without reach or scale, that doesn't change how valuable that creation is, you know, or how much it showcases the fullness of what we're able to do as a company. So
what was like
well done.
Yes, for sure. Last question or thought. What was like, I had so many takeaways from that experience too, of different ways we can get really creative with expanding the IP, and also because we had integrated artists into this project, like as a result also like generating value for them. Like for me, it was such a it was something that we had talked about, but it was such a like manifestation of that. It was an example of that in practice. And I'm so like, for me, I get really, really excited about when I think about this material is done. Like I don't need the artist to necessarily be in the room anymore. I have material I can go and run with. Let's talk about like the codex is a prime example. I want to get the codex in exhibitions. I want those visuals to be on walls. And I want the artists to be represented and naturally for them to gain value from that. And I think that was a really exciting like manifestation, first early manifestation. So like that was something that was exciting for me. I'm curious like if you had a big like light bulb moment in that project.
In Zero specifically?
Yeah. Because I mean,
the
you
light bulb
curated
moment.
it, so
I'll tell you. The light bulb moment for me was figuring out face replacement.
I like that. Yeah.
The moment I figured out I could take your face and put it on a character, and it didn't take like a bunch of crazy AI. Crazy like. I mean, it does take Photoshop work. It definitely does. But when I figured out the process of doing that, I was like, oh, it's over with. Because now I can turn like I remember that week, I was like, hey, want me to turn you into a superhero? All right, cool. I got you. And I was doing that. You know what I mean? And that really expanded the overall idea of being able to draw somebody into a world, right?
Yeah.
Like it's one thing for me to say, hey, I want to be a Dragon Ball Z character, and I draw myself as like a black Super Saiyan.
Yeah.
Right. But it's another thing to literally be able to take my face and like put myself on a character model and then have myself like flying throughout the world. And you see that already existing on games like 2K, right? Where like you take a picture of yourself and then you have your My Player and your it's like really you in playing in the NBA. This is kind of our version of that.
Yeah.
And I think that was like a major light bulb, moment for me, just because of the implications when it comes to the multiplayer ecosystem thing. And I feel like everything else really developed from there. I mean, besides, a friend of mine, Alec Delelio, he was the one that kind of first, like I had, Gabriel Tumlos, a good friend of ours, he was telling me early about like AI generating when he was on Stable Diffusion and stuff. But Alec was the first person that showed it to me in real life. And he actually, the Eternal Garden image that he generated is what ended up becoming kind of the original like banner for the original Eternal Garden drop. And once I saw that, once I laid eyes on it happen, my like literally the brain was changed forever. So I mean, I would say like those two for sure. I feel like everything else is more so just like a culmination of all the different skills that I've acquired over time. But those two were like new, right? So it just opened up the floodgates for everything else.
I love that answer. I remember when you did it for my character, you showed me how to do it, and then you did it by creating a character for me, and I was like, holy shit. This is crazy.
Yeah, because remember it started with me. It started with using Midjourney's program where you can upload an image of someone,
Yeah.
right? And then it would turn their face into a character. But that didn't work as well. Because remember that you were like, this is great, but it doesn't look like me.
Yeah.
Like it kind of looks like me, but it doesn't.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, this is the best I can do until I figured out that I could really put your face on it.
Yeah.
And then, it was over from there. So
Yeah, for sure.
Yes,
I was
ma'am.
in. If I wasn't already in before, I was in by that time, at that moment. Cool. Was there anything else you would like to share before we close this out?
I'm feeling good. The other thing is
Good.
when I figured out I don't want to say the prompt, but there's a very specific phrase in our prompting that to this day I probably still use on everything.
Yeah.
Can you guess it?
You want me to say it?
This is
I'm saying it telepathically.
okay. You can tell me afterwards if you remember. But that was a major one too.
Yeah. Yeah. If it's what I think it is, I remember it was game changing.
Yeah.
But there are two that come to my head, so we'll discuss this off camera.
Okay, for sure.
Cool. All right. Well, that's episode 2. I think then in the next episode, we will probably do something a little bit more interactive, playing around with some products that we like to use, and testing out some new products too that we're interested in the AI and tech space. So thank you for watching, and come back soon.